Good evening, and thank you for joining us today in this presentation or this webinar on online resources for the job seeker. My name's Jodi Hammer, and I am the Career Services Specialist here in the National Peace Corps Association. I work in their Global Reentry Program, helping both the evacuees who were evacuated from their countries because of COVID, as well as other RPCVs with their job searches. And I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight to talk about this topic. And I look forward to hearing your questions, which you are welcome to drop into the chat box at any time. And we can certainly cover those as we go through, or certainly at the end. I do have some slides to share with you and some content, but then do want to allow adequate time in the end for just questions from all of you and sharing tips and advice as well, because you all have been, some of you have been doing this for a while, and you probably have found some tools that you've liked better than others. And so it's great to always have that content as well. I'm all for, discussion, and we learn from each other. So please feel free to weigh in on certain things as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First, I just want to ask a question. Who loves the job search? Anyone? Anyone in our audience? I know many have their cameras off. Okay, Cassandra, you love the job search?
I do.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's rare. Okay, you love your own job search, not like helping others.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've done it quite often, and it's always enlightening for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, enlightening, you probably learn new things as you change, right? There's new tools probably to assist you.
Yep.
And yeah, and I would imagine the excitement of maybe a new job or a new direction that you might be moving into is part of what you're enjoying, right? The thought or the prospect of getting there,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So great. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So often when I've asked that question in the past, I get a resounding no, like crickets, right? Nobody. And then we go into, and I'm going to go into this now. Why or why not? So Cassandra shared why she likes the job search, in many ways, as she's moved about and had a lot of experience. Why not? For those of you who said you didn't like it, I want to hear, and let's see, I'm going to the chat box right now because it looks like it's quite active. Let's see. No, not particularly. Exactly. It's not most people's favorite thing, Rachel. So you're not alone there. And Julie, that's a good point. You like looking, but not applying. Yeah, yeah. I mean, looking can be exciting, right? Kind of like what we were talking about with Cassandra, seeing what's out there and possible jobs for you that might be, a better fit at a certain point in your life. I mean, that is really exciting, right? Seeing what's there. But then when you get into that whole, okay, now I want to apply, and what's that going to look like? And what's that going to require is quite another thing. So great. So I would love people to put in your, right now, if you can, in the chat box, what's your biggest frustration in the job search? What is it that you don't like so much? And it could be everything. That's okay too. But if there are certain aspects that you dread or drag your feet on more than other ones, that would be great to share. All right. It's a lot of work generally for not a lot of results. Toby, really good point, right? Typically, you're applying for several jobs, many jobs, and you may not, you might eventually, get a call back, but it's not, a ratio that you're, necessarily that makes you feel more positive, right? When you have to put in so many, or in some cases you have put in so many and you haven't heard, or you haven't made it to that, final round or whatever. And that can be downright frustrating. Obviously, not only do you feel like you need a job, but, it kind of makes you start to feel, sometimes, gosh, what's wrong with me? Why am I not? And then you hear about friends and other people, in the Peace Corps network or whoever that are getting these jobs, and you're thinking, why am I not? So that can be very frustrating. And that's, I'm glad that you're here, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the, best online, tools to really help you. simplify your job search as much as it can be. It's not going to take it all away, but to make it less painful and hopefully more effective, because it's really more than just a numbers game, right? You know, a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to I'm going to apply for everything and put out as much as I can. And, you know, if I put out enough, surely something will stick, right? Right? It's kind of like pasta on a wall or something, right? You just think you're going to throw out a bunch of stuff and something's going to surely work out. I would much rather have my clients, when I talk to people about, you know, their job search and such, I would much rather see you putting out less, you know, applications and really spending more time on them so that they are really solid and tailored extensively to the position. Incorporating the words that they say, all of those tips and advice that we talk about in many other webinars as well, but quality over quantity, I think, is something that you want to remember with, you know, the job search. And I realize in some way, sometimes people are, you know, feeling desperate, like I just got to get something, so I've got to put out a lot. You know, certainly put out, you know, as many as you can, but keeping that gauge of, am I just applying with the same resume and not tailoring it? Because if that's the case, it's probably not going to work very well for you. So try to, you know, think about that as well. Okay. Let's see here. What else do we have? Andrew, good point. No follow-up after the interview sometimes, you know, and that's really disheartening because, you know, here you've made it to the interview. So obviously, and I want to share this with you too, to remind you of this, to make you hopefully feel better about those situations too. You're obviously among the top candidates if you've made it to the interview, right? After they interview and they do whatever, if they're going to, you know, check references or not, you know, they will at some point, but generally, but if they're looking at LinkedIn profiles and stuff like that, and they're just deciding on, okay, who to go with, it may be that it's really tight between you and somebody else, and they go with someone else. Well, it's really unfortunate when the company doesn't take that brief moment that it takes to just email you back to say something like, you know, thanks, but no, you know, thanks so much for interviewing. While you were a, you know, solid candidate, we've gone with another, you know, another candidate. Please, best wishes in your job search. Whatever, something as short as that, to just let you know and give you that sense of closure. Because when you don't get anything, you're left to kind of feel like it's hanging. Well, there's a, I guess, slight possibility I could still get it. I did get an interview, but they haven't told me anything. I don't know. So you're just kind of left to believe, you know, yeah, it's just, it's nice to get that closure, you know, positive or negative, honestly, so that you can then really fully move on, right? And that's why I do recommend for you in that situation, if you had the interview and maybe you did this, you know, following up after a period of time, you know, I always recommend that you ask a question in the end when they ask you, you know, 9 times out of 10, they're going to ask you, what questions do you have for us? One of the best questions I think you can ask near the end, you know, is, you know, what are the next steps? You know, what is your projected timeline for filling this position? And what are the next steps in the hiring process? Because that way, then you can find out from them, like, okay, well, we're hoping to, you know, we're going to be hiring this by next week. Or, you know, the next step is an interview with and that's going to be another month. And, you know, you get more of a sense of what it's going to be. And you can reply to that in the moment too, you know, to say, well, great, you know, I'm you know, confident my skill set would be an excellent fit here. And I look forward to hearing regarding, you know, next steps or, you know, whatnot, something like that, you know. And the great thing, when they do let you know, thanks, but no thanks, one thing that you might want to do is always follow up with an email back to them to basically say, thanks for the rejection, not in those words, of course, but something like, thanks so much for letting me know regarding, you know, the project manager position. While disappointed to have not been chosen, I wish you the very best with your selected candidate. Should future opportunities arise, please keep me posted as I remain dedicated to da, 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 da. The great thing about doing that is it then puts you in line for the, what if this person A falls through, which I tell you happens all the time. The person decides to take another job. They decide they don't want this job. They maybe fall out because of the reference check and the employer wasn't happy with that or something, and they don't make it through this clearance or whatever it is. And if you've done that, they're like, wow, this person's really professional. Like, they let us know whatever, and they know that you're still interested. And so then who would be the logical next fit if and when that person falls through? Obviously you. Sometimes it can even be for another position, not even the same position. So lots of reasons why to really, you know, keep in touch, whatever. But back to your question, no follow-up after the interview. I get that. And I hope that what I've shared here helps you a little bit. Okay. And let's see if there's any, not ever talking to a person as the process unfolds. Yeah, Cassandra, that's really frustrating. And a lot of times it's, you feel even, it's more like you feel like a bot. There's like, there's just the, the ATS, the applicant tracking system that might be monitoring, the resumes that make it through to a human's eyes. And it feels very artificial in some ways. And that can be hard, and yet, you kind of have to do it. So sometimes they'll have, like a line that you can call the questions, and federal government is supposed to always have that person's either name or contact information or whatever shared on their job postings, so you can actually. But I would hesitate to just reach out. I would make sure that you have a bona fide reason to reach out and check on the status, because they're very busy, as you can imagine, and get a lot of people who do, and there's hundreds of people who are applying oftentimes for those jobs. So okay, great. And then getting references, yeah, Julie, that can be hard, and especially as when sometimes we don't keep in touch as much with people. But the good thing is, in today's day and age, with like whether it's Facebook or I don't know if you're on Facebook or on Facebook with your your references, but when you do follow each other, at least you kind of keep up to date. So it's a little less awkward to go back and from 5 years ago and say, hey, I know we haven't talked forever, but I'm wondering if you'll be a reference for me, so try to keep in touch with them. That can definitely help. Okay, great. So yeah, you hate to ask people. Yeah, it's hard. But people understand that, I mean, references are a fact of life, right? Now, it makes sense for you to ask your former employers. Typically, they want people who've supervised you to be able to vouch for your work performance and all of that. So it's a really good idea to keep in touch with them, right? So if it's, the Facebook or whatever, or if it's even reaching out to them, emailing them, periodically, like not even very often, but just saying, letting them know if you're going into the job market again after being out for a while, to just let them know, hey, thanks so much for, having served as a reference in the past. I really, I just wanted to let you know I'm on the brink of a new whatever, and I'm looking to change into this sector, and wondering if you might still be willing to serve as a reference. I would of course supply you with the position title and the description, and my could certainly provide you with the excerpt from my resume, or my resume which contains when I worked for you, that kind of thing, so that you make it as easy as possible for them to have all of that at the ready. Because if they have it at the ready, when they get asked by people, they come across like, wow, that person's really memorable. It's like, oh, sure, she worked for me. They just pull up your whatever, your little cheat sheet that you gave them. And, oh, sure, she was here from 2008 to 2012, and she was great. I mean, or whatever it was. It might be more recent. Usually they're looking for more recent. But sometimes, you've had a job for 12 years, and you haven't changed. So, you need to go further back. So, okay, great. Let's move on for a little bit. We can certainly come back as time permits as well. But basically what I want to share is some resources first for kind of the career decision making, when you're really unsure of what you even want to do, right? And most of us have been there at some point or another, right? At one point or another. So there are some really good books. I mean, two of the staple books in, career career advising, career coaches use all of that. The first one is my very favorite, and that is, it's an old classic book that's updated like pretty much annually, as I understand it. But What Color is Your Parachute? And it's a practical manual for job seekers and career changers. So it's really good it's as good for people who might be just coming out of college and starting, as it is for people who are looking to make career changes. And it has very up-to-date information and recommendations on the different aspects of the job search, including networking, which we'll talk about more in a moment, resumes and cover letters and all of those things, like where to find jobs, all of that kind of thing. So that's a really good one. And they do have a workbook, and you can get these online, and you can also they have the online versions if you prefer. There's also an accompanying workbook that goes with it that I just found really helpful, because it has some more visual. For example, one of the most visual ones that I can remember is where there's like a flower, and you're filling out the different flower with the parts, and it's much more, I learn like that better than just a list of A, B, C, X, Y, Z, right? So it's very practical, and I really like it. So that's, those are two but there are many, 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 many out there, right? The Knock 'em Dead is the other one that's really considered the classic. Now that one supposedly gets updated. It does get updated frequently. The most recent version that I saw of the ultimate whatever was, I think, 2017 or 18, which I think would be recent enough, right? But it has, some good information. It's considered a classic, as well. So there's detailed advice on all those different aspects. Those are kind of the like catch-all and career decision making, like when you're not sure what you want to do, right? But there's also there's some that are for like personality or your type indicator, resources. I don't know how many of you are familiar with like the Myers-Briggs. But the Myers-Briggs is, one of the like personality, type indicators. And for example, the ENFP, right, is what you get a 4-letter code. So it's extrovert is the E, or introvert. So the first is either an E or an I, right? Your next one, intuitive or sensing, I think it's N or S. And then you have the T or J is the N. So there's like 4 of them, right? I won't go through all of them because I don't have time to go into the details. But basically, this is founded on a lot of research that's been done on how certain careers, certain jobs, your personality or your type indicator, right, if you know that, it can help you find a more rewarding career for you. So there's lots of different careers, and it's and different ones. If you're more of an introvert, you're going to gravitate towards certain ones. More of an extrovert, that type of thing, or maybe you're on the line right in between. But there's all, how you think, how you process things, and a lot of times if you can get in sync with what your natural fit and your natural comfort level is, you can do a better job easier. Not that you couldn't succeed at a different job, right? But you could, the chances of you feeling successful and enjoying a job is greater, if in general, right? If it's within this like same type indicator. So Lexi, I see that you put that you're an ENFJ. Awesome. I am an ENFP, just like you, Andrew. So and Julie, an INTJ. Great. So we're all very different, right? Other than Andrew and I are the same. But can you tell me, Lexi or Andrew or Julie, have you ever like learned about like jobs when you did your Myers-Briggs or your type indicator? Did you learn about specific jobs? Was it part of like your career center at your college? Sometimes they'll do it there, and then they'll help you to steer you into certain directions. I'm wondering, because if you have anything to share on yours, like what kinds of jobs an ENFJ is really, generally good at, or an ENFP, whatever, I would love to hear that. I mean, for the group to kind of know what we're talking about a little bit. So feel free to take yourself off the mic, mute, and share.
Yeah, I can share. So I was in a leadership class and I took the Myers-Briggs test and we talked about it. And I remember seeing that some career suggestions for my type were politician and filmmaker, and the website showed you famous people who also had your same Myers-Briggs results. Yeah, and so I really liked that part because I had Barack Obama and someone else, and so that was really exciting to see as well. And they could tell you a lot about what kind of structure is best for you at work. I don't know if it's kind of like horoscopy, but I thought it really applied to me, so that was really interesting.
Great. That's awesome. Andrew, I don't know if you want to share anything. Either way, no pressure.
Yeah, hey Jodi. Yeah, I'd love to. And I took the similar test, 16 personalities, which covers the Myers-Briggs personality types. And yeah, I tested as an ENFP, and I remember reading as part of the results that, and since we're the same, you probably know this as well, that we don't like to be micromanaged at all.
Yeah.
And and when we worked in like structured work environments, it's hard for us to really um, it's keeping us in a box, and we like to think outside the box.
Right.
So
We're the thinkers. The thinkers like what possibility, right? Like,
right,
oh,
right,
yeah.
exactly what the future could be. So I think we're more adept to applying for careers that will allow us to be creative um, and not be constrained by like a bunch of regulations or uh, like a strict working environment or organization of
Right.
what our work is supposed to be.
Yeah, we like the freedom, the flexibility, the like, yep, yep. And did you hear anything with it regarding like we are the helpers, the like helping professions? Oftentimes.
Yeah, I think I remember reading too that teachers uh, or
Yep,
like coaches, that would
yep.
be a good career. And
Presenting, training. Yep.
right, right, exactly. And which is interesting because my background is mostly in education. So I've taught
Okay.
in when I served in Colombia, I was a English teacher trainer. So I
Right.
worked with um, local teachers over there on strategies on how to teach English more effectively in the classroom and so forth. And then I also did other teaching gigs as well in the past. So
Well,
yeah.
there you go. Not that you're just going to have to stay in teaching all the time, because teaching's great, but there are
Right.
other things too, and you can certainly branch out. Thank you, Andrew, for sharing that also. I really appreciate it. And you, Lexi.
Sure.
That was very helpful. So suffice it to say, there are lots of different personality and aptitude tests, and I think some, there's a strong Campbell interest inventory. There's some other ones. Some of them, like Lexi, you had that comment earlier where you didn't know if it was more horoscopy, but some of them I think are less scientific, clearly. There has been quite a bit of, science research done on the, with the Myers-Briggs and all that kind of thing. So it's, pretty accurate, but at the same time, are you ever going to fit completely into one specific, group? Like say everything fits you, but there's one aspect of that that's like, no, that's so not me. Well, that's fine. It's they're not trying to, I don't think, put everyone into this one exact where there's no differences between the two. Andrew and I clearly probably have differences between the two of us, and we're both ENFPs. I mean, and all of that still. So there is still that individual aspect. So you can find a lot of different ones. Some are free, some are fee-based. The Myers-Briggs itself is generally fee-based. But there is the Keirsey, oh goodness, Keirsey temperament. That's kind of the free version, if you will. You can kind of get an idea without having to pay, because it's not cheap. I mean, it's not super expensive, but it's, I mean, you don't probably have a lot of funds right now, and I'm all for, doing the free resources when at all possible. So, if you think that would be helpful to you, you might want to, check. So let's talk a little bit about organizing your job search, right? Because so much of it, we're talking tonight about online tools for the job seeker. So, what are some things that can really help the job seeker facilitate and simplify the job search, right? And one of the things is just getting yourself organized, right? Period, overall. Kind of like what the, this picture has, right? It's like this clean, whatever. And I know many of you are probably like, oh, that is so not my, and I'm with you in terms of, like the papers or the piles or the whatever you have your like to do and what you're going to, so my desk doesn't necessarily work, like this. In fact, right now I'm working out of my cardboard cubicle, if you will, in my basement with COVID. So, we have a very small house, so I'm making it work how I can. But yeah, so getting yourself though, like freeing your mind, clearing your mind, and that does come to some degree with clearing your space that's right in front of you and surrounding where you're doing your job search. So trying to do that. I think it's a lot easier to do a job search, not necessarily in a public space. Like some people will go and you know what's best for you. but I find it difficult, I think, to focus and keep the focus on when, there's these constant interruptions. You're in whatever coffee shop and people are coming in and out, and every time you kind of lose focus, it takes time to get back into it. So I find a quiet areas better personally, and in general. So I would recommend that. But in terms of ways to keep organized, definitely like, subscribing to, job alerts. There are so many job, like, job posting websites, right? Put a few of them in the chat box that you use. Okay. Some of the ones, there's a ton of them, right? Where you can see all these amazing jobs so, but a lot of them, you can do you can set up a job alert. So it's like, let me know anytime there's a job in with these keywords, or in this location, in this whatever sector, so that you get these job alerts. You know what? That is brilliant. Because when you set up those job alerts, it frees you up from having to physically go in and check periodically each of those and weed through all the ones that are not relevant to you to find those few gems. I mean, what an awesome feature, right? It saves you so much time. And it also allows you generally to prevent missing out on jobs that maybe were perfect, but you happen to go in and check, like, when it was closing tomorrow and there's no way you can do the application in that time. So doing the job alerts when it makes sense from your reliable ones. Let's see, USA Jobs, absolutely, they'll always let you know. Handshake, yes, which is through your college, if you're a more recent graduate, or from graduate school too. LinkedIn, yep, Rachel, good. We're going to talk a little more about LinkedIn and some other ones. So yeah, there's a lot of RPCB Career Link. I'm glad to see that come up. Excellent. Yes, they have Peace Corps. The agency has hundreds of jobs that are posted at any time. I don't know how many's on there right now. Last time I looked, I think, at one point, a couple months ago, there were almost 1,000. It was like 900 jobs, and about 400 were for NCE, right? For the federal government, for candidates that had non-competitive eligibility, right? But the ebb and flow with everything, it's going to be lower, sometimes higher, whatever. But yeah, so there's lots of jobs, and typically jobs that RPCBs are interested in, right? Because over the years, I used to work at Peace Corps, and for 12 years in the Career Center, actually working in a similar capacity to what I'm doing now. When they had a career center, and literally the jobs that they know that they know what they're looking for. People come back to it because they're like, ooh, RPCBs are great candidates. They're really hard workers. They're flexible. They're whatever, and so they come back to it. And so you have a lot of really good jobs. Yes, many of them are federal, and many of them are not. So yeah, definitely that's a great one. It's good. Use your Google Calendar, of course, right? Set reminders. You can do that on your cell phone, on your, whatever, like setting reminders for yourself so that your, calendar, you're up to date on what you're going to do, and just making it a discipline, like, using your Google Calendar or whatever calendar, right? But looking through and looking the day before to kind of really remember all of the things that you're planning to do. And you can even slot out periods of time. Like if you're the kind of person where, you say, I'm going to do, research I'm going to research the organizations that I'm most interested in. And then days slip by and you never get that done. Like make an appointment with yourself and put, the, sector, analysis or whatever it is, like, research, whatever organization, and have that slotted in there so that you honor that and have that in your calendar. That's an easy, tip that's, outside of anything else. Using apps to help. There's a lot of different, apps on your phone that can help the job seeker. And I'm going to point you to, I'm going to ask if anyone has any off their top of their head that they want to put in the chat box. But you can, if you do a Google search and, best job seeker, apps, or apps for the job seeker, you're going to find, some different ones. But of course, look at their ratings and do reviews, and, you don't, because there's a lot of junk out there too, right? So I always recommend asking your friends, your colleagues, your people that that you maybe meet that are in the sector that you're interested in. And, just as you get to know them, what kinds of apps did you find helpful, or did you use any, job search apps, on your cell phone. I'm just looking at reorganizing, that kind of thing. Toby, so you just started using Focus To Do. It's a Pomodoro timer. Okay. And to-do list. I don't know that one actually. So it's handy. It's helpful. Focus To Do. That's great. Okay. And is that free? Also great if it is. Yes. I love, see, there's so many free things to help us out. It's great. So awesome. Toby, if you want, totally up to you, but if you want to take a moment to just unmute yourself, you're welcome to tell kind of what does Focus To Do really, like, how does it work? I mean, it's to-do list, it sounds like, and then you can probably check off and whatever. And if not, that's fine.
Yeah, so it's like a to-do list, and you can have projects with tasks underneath them. And then you can do like a Pomodoro timer for each task in the project. So it like kind of tracks how much time you're spending on the different items on your to-do list over time. So you'd be able to see, like, after a few months or something, how much time you spent job searching, for instance, or if you were studying something, you could see how much time you spent studying.
So does it automatically track? Does it automatically count when you're doing this stuff, or do you go in and physically like start it?
You have to start the timer, the Pomodoro timer. Yeah.
Okay.
But you can have it like automatically do the timers for you. You could like press play at the beginning of the day, and it would just keep doing the Pomodoro timer over and over and over again. Or you could go in and do it manually and pause and restart it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. Lexi says she's gonna download it right now. She'll get to try it out and tell me how it is. That's great. All right. So any other tips that folks have in terms of like online resources to help you in organizing your job search, whether it's an app or it's a website or whatever, in terms of organizing? And then we're going to move into actually like a spreadsheet type of thing, because I think that's what a lot of people are not doing enough of, is keeping a master spreadsheet of, like a job search tracker, where you've applied to and the, resume you used and all of that. And they just get so confused. And then when somebody does reach out to them eventually, it's hard to remember what resume they used and, just all of that. So we're going to go into that as well. But okay, great. So, well, let's go ahead and go. And then if you have, you can share then later on as well, but keeping organized. So how do you stay organized, right? And that's what we've kind of already started, discussing, right? There's a lot to keep organized. And so when I just mentioned, a moment ago, a spreadsheet, doing some kind of an Excel spreadsheet, right? Or whatever, but Excel has a version, right? Or a Google, what do you call it? A Google sheet or whatever, that version. So what kind of content is important to include in your mind, to include if you do have any kind of a tracker or any kind of a spreadsheet that kind of has where you've applied and all of that? What kind of information are you, putting in there above and beyond the, like, employer name, the job title, the date you applied, closing date, whatever? What other information are you including, or would you think is important to include? Just dump it in the chat box. If anyone has anything. Topics to study up on, Lexi says. Yeah, that could be, if there's certain kinds of jobs where you need to know a little more about maybe an aspect that, you don't know as much about, you could definitely put that in there. Yep. And let's just imagine yourself, I am applying for XYZ job right now, a program manager job at, CDC or whatever, like what do what's the information that I need to track? Let's see, we have link to job description, where you found it. Great, Rachel, that's a really good point. The job description. Now, when you say link to job description, though, do you mean the one that's online that you replied to? Because if so, I would urge you to make sure that you download, or copy and paste that content somewhere into a document that's, on your Google Drive or on your, laptop. Because here's the deal. Once that job closes, typically those job descriptions come down before they've made their selection. So what happens if they reach out to you, 2 days after the jobs come down, and they say, we'd like to interview you for this position, and you go back and you're like trying to remember what position it is, and you click on that little link you had, guess what? It's no longer active. This position's closed. You don't see it. So that really stinks, because the last thing you want to do is have to go to an employer and say, what position was this for again? Can you resend the job description? Like, that just doesn't make you look very organized or very with it, right? So it's much better if you include that from the start. You have where you've downloaded it somewhere, so you can go right to that, see what the job is, and the version of your resume that you used. So I would have a column saying, resume or whatever, the link to the version that you use, because you have many versions, right? You should have many versions anyway, because you should be definitely tailoring your resume to the job that you're applying for. So you want to be able to go into that interview or, whatever, with that same job description, having the job description, knowing it, and that same resume that you applied for. So you're consistent. Okay. Great. So let's see here, dates maybe download it or save it. Yep, as a PDF. Exactly. That's great, Lexi. Download it or save it as a PDF. Exactly. The names of anyone you actually talked to at the company, that is so important. And I will tell you, that is one of the biggest things that people forget. And then you're like, oh, I talked to somebody, who was it? And I would have the person that you talked to, right? But then also, if you can, their contact information. And likewise, if you were referred to the job by somebody, or you heard about the job from a specific person, put that down, because then when you're doing your, you're prepping for your interview, once you get it, if you do get it, right? And hopefully you will, you can then reference that person. And that can be really, and you might want to reach out to that person and say, hey, I'm really thrilled to let you know I got an interview for this position. And I just thank you so much for referring me or telling me about the position. I'm really excited. And they might offer, oh, great, I'll let them know. I'll reach out to them or whatever. But at least it's on the top of their radar then, if they do get contacted by them, to say, hey, you referred this person, or you forwarded them on. What's your take on them? And they'll be more in the loop. So great. Dates and type of correspondence. Yep. So follow up, for example, maybe you have a column, and there's no one right or wrong way to do it, right? But if you have the employer name in a column, and then the, job title and the job description link, but include the other one that I said, and then, the closing date, resume, applied, or resume, cover letter, whatever the links to that, like I was saying. But, maybe, the date so you have the date that you applied, and then, and the, when the closing date is, and sometimes there isn't a closing date, so you don't know that, right? But having all of that information can be so helpful. And then you could have a column that has follow-up. So follow-up from from after you applied, if you haven't heard back, what date did you follow up, and have a link maybe to, what you included in that. Maybe it's as simple as an email that just says, I'm just writing to check the status of the XYZ position that I applied for on, I remain extremely interested in this opportunity, and I'm confident my skill set would be well utilized. It's just like something to just kind of, refresh their memory, right? And show them that you're still interested, right? And anytime they say one thing on, oh, we're going to be hiring, we're going to be interviewing in a week, you can almost guarantee double that time by the time, because things always come up, right? It seems. So it always takes longer than expected. So don't get, all worked up if you haven't been, contacted within a week, is I guess what I'm saying. Okay. So you can make it, like I said, you can make your own, spreadsheet, and we're going to see a sample one on the next page, on the next slide, excuse me. But definitely you do what works for you. And it doesn't really matter if it all fits onto one page when you print it out, because guess what? You're really not going to be printing it. You're going to be, more often than not, really, really all you're going to be doing, you're going to be looking at it online and looking at and scrolling over and just making sure you've done everything, whatever. It doesn't have to print nicely onto, one page. So you can have it be a ginormous spreadsheet, and that's absolutely fine. Okay. Great. All right. So keeping organized. Great. Here's the sample that I wanted you to see. And this is a sample from the Muse. And as many of you may know that have heard me do other workshops, the Muse is one of my favorite online resources. and I didn't make a separate slide for this, but my, a couple of my very favorites, the Muse, which is amazing, and they have great advice. Now, they have so many free resources now, and they'll like, when you go there and stuff, they'll ask, do you want to be notified of this one, as most sites do, right? They do have some paid services, but there's no pressure to do it, and they're not like, on your case trying to get you to join, whatever. So I love the Muse. I also love balancecareers.com. They likewise, I just believe in what they say. I really, like their content. It's really simple. A lot of times I'll pull, I pulled this sample here from, the Muse, and to share it. And I'm always steering people to those, as two of my favorite online resources. And yeah, so there's many, right? But those are two of my, very favorites. So, but you notice in here how it has the general information. This is a simple Excel spreadsheet, right? I think, right? Isn't it? Or is it a Google Sheet, actually? It is a Google Sheet, sorry. A Google spreadsheet, that's the word. So, the company, the job posting, the date it was found, did you apply, date applied, do your research. So you put all of that in there, right? Sending the follow-up email, those kind of things, date sent, it's everything pre-interview, right? Then it gets into more interview once you get the interview, right? So the date, did you send your thank you note, which you should always send a thank you note. Rachel, I love it. The Muse spreadsheet changed my life. I am glad to hear that. It sounds like you too are a big fan of the Muse. They have very good materials, and this is really well done. You could always tailor this to yourself, right? So interview 1, you'll see the date sent, send a follow-up, and then there's, if you scroll over on this, it's like interview 2, interview 3, because sometimes there are more than one interview, right? There's more than one interview, but you can make the columns, you can personalize, the columns for what you need. So I think that's the really, and you've never been so organized in a job search. I love it, Rachel. That is great. So yeah, take that for what it's worth, adapt it as you wish, but it will also be linked into in the resources that I'm sending out afterwards that will have, that will have the resources that I've used and some of my favorite resources that I came across in doing this. Does anyone have any questions so far on, for example, this spreadsheet or anything that I've covered so far before we go into the very end? And I know we're getting to closer to the hour, about 10 minutes, so I'm almost done here. And then I want to definitely take whatever questions you have. So please start to, if you haven't already, put your general questions about, online resources and things like that into the chat box. And the great thing is some of the others of you might have some good answers. So please, it doesn't have to be Lexi or myself necessarily answering. Sometimes you might have, like Rachel said, hey, the Muse spreadsheet changed my life. That's a great testimonial. I know if I were a participant in this and I weren't already familiar with it, I'd be like, wow, I'm checking that out. So they might have some insight too for you. So yes, Julie, you will get, I'm sorry, I don't think I can do it right here, but actually, no, it's right on top. See the where it says job search tracker, and that I did put it there. It looks ugly, I know, but I thought I wanted to have it so that you could take it and then save it on your own. So just if you copy and paste, take a screenshot of this or of this page and then just enter it in manually. That's probably the easiest way. You could also do job search tracker template by the Muse, or and you'll probably get it as well. But as well, afterwards, I'm going to put it in the resources section, which is the first section in our follow-up emails that we always send with resources. We point people to the resources that we use to create this, or in this case, I'll have this one linked, certainly. Okay, great. Okay, so let's go on and talk a little bit about, and this is, as I said, my other favorite source, the Balanced Career. This was done by them, and I definitely trust them a lot, them and the Muse. I mean, they do a good job of really kind of doing a comprehensive overview. I wanted to put this on here because we can talk about some of the things, right? Some of them you may have experience with, and if you do, I'd love to maybe hear that. So for example, like Indeed, I'm almost positive most of you have heard of Indeed, right? Indeed is it won in the 2020 in their whatever assessment that they did, the best overall. And that's saying a lot because there are a lot of them out there, and there's a lot that are actually pretty good, right? So Indeed has, there's so many, in fact, on Indeed, I had a stat that was on the top of my head. Goodness, there are, it was how many, it'll come back to me, I think. Anyway, it's a lot of jobs are posted there, right? I think I remember something about like every second there are 10 new jobs posted on Indeed. That's huge. That's a lot of jobs every second. So LinkedIn was the runner up for best overall, and that doesn't surprise me at all. LinkedIn has really established itself as quite the networking and, job search, professional networking, right? Site, I mean, and resource. They really have. And I think they've just been acquired by, was it Microsoft, or who just bought them? Did anyone hear? I thought that LinkedIn was just acquired by someone else, but yeah, anyway. It's so there, and I'm going to talk more about LinkedIn, so I'm going to skip that one right now, right? And there are a couple of these that are very specific. Like, I am not as familiar personally with Dice, but it won best for tech jobs, right? I don't do as much in tech. Yeah, Microsoft bought it. That's what I thought. Thanks, Lexi. So for tech jobs, if that's your industry, if that's your sector, check that one out. It's worth checking out and seeing, if it has, good stuff on there, because it won the best of, right? So a lot of us are looking for remote jobs right now, right? Because everything's remote with COVID. So Flex Jobs is the one that, there are others, but that's the one that won the best for remote jobs. So check that out for the time being right now, right? Snag a Job won for best hourly. Now it depends, you may or may not be looking for hourly wage jobs, depends, on where you are and, at the period of your time and what you're looking for. So Google for jobs, yeah, talk about, the easiest, right? I mean, we all know how to Google, and Google, it's easy to get there and just, find some postings and stuff. So that's good. Simply Hired has a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different, I think, fields, which is why they, a lot of different like sectors, if you will, and kinds of jobs, right? Ladders is if you're a mid-career professional and maybe moving up and kind of getting closer to that executive level and looking for those kinds of jobs, Ladders is going to be your best. That's going to be a really good resource for you. Glassdoor question: has anyone used Glassdoor? And if you have, just put it how you've used it in the chat box as I'm introducing it. Glassdoor is a great resource, right? I used to tell, and I still tell people, one of the great things that you can check on Glassdoor is salaries. A lot of times you don't get information on what the salaries are, but you can go to Glassdoor and you can get, you can put in, the information and such, and they just compile a lot of information on a lot of different organizations and all of that. So you can get an idea maybe for the, salary and stuff. You can also get an idea of like okay, let's see, Toby, you've used it to look up potential interview questions. Good. Absolutely. Glassdoor is also good for, sometimes, you'll get like, oh, hey, this organization always asks about this, this, and this. So these are some tips. So you'll get a lot of insight into maybe common, some of the interview questions that they use, a specific organization. That's great. You can also get insight into the organizational culture, because Glassdoor, it like, they can, people, rate it, right? And of course, the only thing I would say with that is give it the credence it deserves. When you see like an organization and it's rated and it doesn't have all 5s or all whatever, it's not, there's some troublesome comments. Just remember that, typically people who are dissatisfied are much more likely to take the time and effort to complain about it and and I'm not saying it's false at all, but I'm saying if it's a one random off that looks kind of weird, that, wow, they really got, like totally, just panned. It could be that this was, one example of a person who had a bad experience or whatever. Or sometimes I've heard of, and this is terrible, where people, go in and they'll do a false kind of a negative, review to try to bring their competition, whatever down, and, that kind of thing. But they have some resources to kind of help about that too, I think. But Glassdoor is good. So great. I'm glad that some of you have used it. Link Up, one for, the most current job listings. Has anyone used Link Up? I ask only because I haven't used it as much, that particular one, but I know I have heard, of it and that it's fairly good. So yeah, so these are some of the ones. Now there are many. What are some other ones that you really like that you can dump into the chat box so that we have this. And then you all, before you leave, definitely save the chat the chat conversation, because it'll have that link to that Lexi put in, and I think Julie too, the link to the job search tracker. It'll have these different comments that people made. So definitely to download it, simply go to the bottom of the chat box where you see that little square with the 3 dots inside. Just click on that and it'll say save chat, and it'll basically save it to wherever your Zoom folder is on your laptop or smartphone or whatever it is. So definitely I would recommend doing that. Okay, great. So LinkedIn, very quickly, right? Best online tool for networking, right? It really is the largest. You have 690 million users in 200 countries. Like, talk about a lot of people, and international. 200 countries, that's pretty impressive. There's the free versus the paid premium levels. I honestly think you can get what you need through the free version versus paying the premium. Now, you can get a month free of the premium, and if you want to milk it for all it's worth, definitely activate that, and just remember to cancel it, because otherwise they'll start just automatically charging. But if you want to use it and use all those, it gives you some advanced features and unlimited searches. Whereas if you're not doing that and you're doing the free, you have some limits. But there's ways to get around that. And I'm not going to spend time here talking about it, because we have separate LinkedIn, videos that talk about specifically how, when you get when you do the people search and whatever, and past employer and current employer or whatever, you get these people, instead of clicking on the links there, you're gonna not click on it there. You're gonna go into a new window and then go in and then just search for their name, and that way it won't count against you. So there's different things like that to help you. Okay, joining groups is key, because it gives you access to more people, and it also gets you connected to your industry and that sector where you're going to learn things, and people share resources, and you should also share resources within the group. Post them when there's a good resource that's relevant, right? And also comment on things so that you show up as somebody who's an active participant, right? Because that then gives you more credibility and kind of presence. That way, when you do eventually want to network with people in that group, they're going to recognize your name. Oh, sure, yeah, I've seen her, and be maybe more more likely to do that. Great. If you do have any other questions here, please put them in the chat box, because I will answer those if you have them, and maybe you don't, that's fine. But I just want to say there's tutorials available as well, and the separate recordings. You can go onto LinkedIn, and there's a lot of learning right there on LinkedIn on how to use and how to do it best. That said, I'm really trying to get somebody from LinkedIn itself. I'd love to. I'm kind of working some contacts there to try to see about getting somebody to maybe do a session, on, as the professional of LinkedIn, talking about maybe more with our audience. So if you by chance know anyone in that capacity, let me know. You can certainly reach me. Lexi, did you drop my shortened the rpcv.org address in the chat box? If not, if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be great. You could always get a hold of me as well. So Facebook, many consider more personal, myself included. So I'm personally not doing, I mean, I can see you doing some job search related things when you maybe post on your Facebook, if you're like a job seeker, to say, hey, does anyone know anyone in the XYZ sector? I'm really wanting to get a little more insight into whatever. Fine. But in terms of like adding new people that you don't really know, well, I would leave Facebook, and obviously depends on how you use Facebook as well. But I would probably leave that other professional networking to the LinkedIn. That's what I do. So, my Facebook account is much more of my personal, friends and family and, whatever. And then my LinkedIn is more of the professional networking. So, and then here, this is just a slide, really, it is the most expansive, one, recruiters use it to screen candidates. There's the one-click application processes for if you want to apply for a job on LinkedIn. You can do I think it's called one click or whatever, where literally you just, it links them to your, your LinkedIn profile. So it's super easy to apply for a lot of these jobs, right? And then just a reminder that employers do use LinkedIn, and they review your LinkedIn. The majority, they're gonna look you up before they hire you. They're gonna make sure that you are worthy of of bringing on, and that you are someone that would fit within their organizational culture. So with networking itself, I just want people to like remember that, networking is not cheating the system whatsoever. It's just using your existing, contacts and putting your feelers out, and also expanding your network of people who you connect with and about, that you're talking with, that know of you, of your background, because that's the reality of the job search these days. That's how it happens. You get jobs. Trust me, you're going to need to know what you need to know for the job, right, to get the job. But it can get you to that to be considered pile, get you to that interview stage when you do need to like prove yourself. But it's so helpful, and there's just a huge percentage of jobs come from that. Okay. So great. So suffice it to say, the job search is tough, but there are many online resources to help you. So you can make sense of it. And these are just some of them. And, I have my little, any questions right here, as well. If you do have any questions, I'm looking at the, Lexi, are there any questions that have come in at the end here since we had our last exchange?
No.
Okay. That's fine. No problem. It's right about 9 o'clock anyway. So that is absolutely fine. I hope that I've answered your questions then. And then what I would say is if you do have follow-up questions, you could certainly reach out to me. I'll just go ahead and stop the recording here. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a future recording.